Hey everyone, welcome to Coffee and Conversation.
What's up?
What's up?
What's up?
We're so excited for today's conversation. We're going to be talking about vulnerability and intimacy.
Oh, that's deep.
That's deep. We're going to go and do a deep dive into this today.
Yes. And are you ready?
I'm ready. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
I hope you're ready. Do you have your coffee? Are you ready? Get your coffee.
Get your
You
coffee.
ready to go?
Stop the video and go get your coffee.
Go get your
Go get your coffee.
All right, awesome.
Yes. So I'm gonna start this way. All right. So there's like basics of everything. Like there's basics of life. There's basics of communication. There's basics of everything. So I think intimacy and vulnerability is the basics of communication. Communicating with your spouse is intimacy and vulnerability. And so this is the place to be.
Yes. This is such an important topic. And I just want to say that the reason why we decided to go first with talking about intimacy and vulnerability is because if you're in a position where your relationships are really struggling, if you're not fighting for intimacy, right, which really intimacy is defined, it has to do with being close, right? It's a closeness that we have. And we're going to continue to talk about how there are different levels of intimacy, there's different types of intimacy. But if you're not fighting for something in your relationships, that's where people end up calling it quits, right? And so what we're really fighting for is to maintain and to go deeper in the intimacy of our relationships. And vulnerability is going to be the key or the basics to helping you do that.
Yes, definitely. So what is vulnerability for those that don't know? Vulnerability is just being open, just like this openness, like opening and not being scared of criticism or attack. So that's what vulnerability is. Vulnerability is a place where you just get to the lowest of yourself. You put your pride away, you put the chains away, you put everything away. And so you just get vulnerable with the person and say, baby, I'm struggling and I need your help. An example, there was a point in my life where I was very, didn't even know I had feelings. And I was kind of like prideful, and I had to really come to a place where I could say, baby, I need your help with this. Like I can't do this by myself. And so that was an area where I was like, you know what? I'm gonna bring it to her. And then, but the Holy Spirit helps those.
Just as he was speaking, I start thinking about the typical maybe husband-wife quarrel, or that's where it's like, ask for directions. I don't want to. Ask for directions. No. And you just ask. And it's so funny that you're saying that because, and like I said, that's the first thing that popped into my mind, because I thought about how there are so many times where him and I would be driving and he likes to drive. I'm like, okay, let you drive. No problem. Fine. All right. Not that I always like his driving, but, and now I'm going to connect this to vulnerability in a minute. Don't worry, I'm not picking on you. But when we talk about vulnerability, there's two things that are happening here, right? So for Patrick, he loves to be in charge of driving. And so I want to have a role in that though. Okay. So I'll be the one that's always wanting to man the GPS and be like, hey, okay, just be careful. You have to make a left. It's coming up here, because sometimes we get into conversation, we miss turns, and I'm like, I don't want this way. And it becomes a whole thing. Right.
And I'm, okay, hold on. And I'm really bad at directions. So I think it's like the second exit, make a right. And I'm like, wait, what?
And you missed the exit. Now we got 24 minutes on our trip. We're already running late.
And so it makes sense. And then sometimes you're like, I don't feel like asking for help. I got this. You get that little man side. You guys know what I'm talking about. Like, I got this. I don't need your help. But in reality, you're like, shoot, I don't know where I'm going. And so that's in that little place right there, in that little moment is where you say, babe, I do need your help. So that's the part of vulnerability where
Yeah, so that exactly. So that's that part of vulnerability where for Patrick, for him to turn around and say to me, like, "Hey, I actually do need help. Can you let me know?" Because we would actually argue in the car. So I'm like, just let me help you. You know, like you got to keep your eyes on the road. That's one thing. It's hard to look at the GPS at the same time. I'm just sitting here, just enjoying the ride. I can tell you, hey, make sure you're about to go here, so we can still have those conversations. So that was a step for him. And it seems like such a small thing, but it does change so much. Now, on my end,
yes.
vulnerability becomes me turning around and saying, not saying, I can't stand the way you drive. Like that's gonna offend him, and he's just gonna be like, leave me alone, woman, right? But that's not what we're going for here.
Yeah.
What we're going for here is open and honest communication that is vulnerable. And so for me, it's to be able to say what I'm feeling. So if I tell, him and he's driving a certain way and I'm starting to feel a little fear inside, right? I'm getting that little bit of that fear response. Instead of casting a judgment on the way that he's driving, I can change that and say, the way that this driving is happening is triggering a fear inside of me.
Yeah.
Which is very different than saying, I feel like you're a terrible driver. That's just a judgment. I just judged his driving. I didn't actually express anything vulnerable to him because he doesn't know anything about me. I'm just telling him about himself.
Yeah, and that could also mean for a guy, like, just maybe that guy's feeling insecure, or maybe I'm feeling like you're not understanding me. But for you to come around and say, listen, babe, this is it, and I'm over here like scared, or there was a situation in your life where something happened with your dad or your mom, where you were driving and she would like ballistic and scream at you. So at that moment of time is basically just being vulnerable and not calling your husband like, you're a terrible driver, how dare you, go back to school and start driving again. But instead you just like, and give him that space and just be like, babe, it's okay, you're doing a good job. And then when you get home, you tell him the truth. No, I'm joking, but
yeah, but sometimes, and it's hard sometimes to do it in that moment, right? So if I'm already feeling fear,
yeah,
and sometimes you can't communicate that in the moment because maybe you're not there yet, and that's okay too.
Yeah.
If it just becomes like, okay, I'm just gonna process what I'm feeling inside, take myself through this, and then we'll sit down and talk. Like, because if you're both accelerated in the car, it's not going to go anywhere, right? And you're trapped now because you're in a moving vehicle that is probably going 60 miles an hour. It's not a good idea. Maybe save it for later. But I think when you get later on down the road in your vulnerable communication, then you can really come to a point where, there's times now where we'll drive and he misses an exit or he almost hits a car or whatever it is that happens. He's not that bad. I'm just saying these things do happen sometimes. But so when something like that happens now, I'm trying to be more mindful in how I speak to him, and I'll say, babe, I appreciate you wanting to drive. I appreciate you wanting us to keep us safe, because he does, like, sometimes he'll go grandma slow, sometimes he'll go really fast if he's nervous. So I'm like, you got to keep this man calm, keep his heart rate down. But now I'll say, baby, I feel fear when you drive this way. And I'm not accusing you. I'm not saying but when you miss that exit, all I could think about was, oh my goodness, we're going to be late. We might miss this. We might miss that. And I'm feeling fear inside. I'm feeling conflicted. So it makes it about what I'm feeling and not about pushing my judgment onto him.
Yeah. And that's really good, because like that helps me kind of understand, like, oh, she's in trouble. There's something that I could do here. I could fix that. And so I'm an auto technician, so I'm always fixing things, and that is my job to fix. And there's a lot of guys up there that their job is to fix. And so like our mind automatically is like, oh, she's scared. Let me slow down, or let me speed up a little because we might be late. And so definitely it makes a lot of sense, instead of judging that person and saying, you're a horrible driver, you cannot drive, get out of the way, let me drive.
Which I've said before.
Which
I'm not gonna lie.
So,
early on, I'm like, just let me drive.
Yeah,
I'll do it.
Yeah, and so she is from the city, and I'm from upstate. And so what happens is, I'm like not used to the city and finding parkings, but she like an ego. She's like, there's a parking right there. There's a parking right there, right there. And I'm like, where is that parking? And so what happens was, she's like, one time she's like, let me drive. You cannot find a parking lot. I got this. I'm like, wait, no, I can do it. And so she was a little annoyed, and then I was like, you know what, I got a baby, but it's different now. Now we know how to get vulnerable. Now we know how to get intimate, and now it's not more about you. It's about me. Like, what am I feeling?
Yeah. And that actually, I think, opens up a road for us for compassion. I think when we stand in a position of judgment, right, making it about the other person, it doesn't invite in conversation to talk about what's really happening. Because at the end of the day, we're only in control of ourselves, our emotions, our responses, our thoughts about things, right? And so I think that's really important when it comes to vulnerability, especially, which is connected to our level of closeness or our intimacy, because when we're standing in judgment, what we're actually doing is pushing that person away. But when we are compassionate towards what they could be feeling, and don't assume that somebody knows what you're feeling, because most of the time they don't know what you're feeling. Like, I think one of the things for me that I had to break very early on was saying, oh, he should know. Like, he should know that I'm scared because of how he's driving. Maybe he doesn't. Maybe he's just like, this is how I drive, and I think I'm doing great. And, but I'm scared on the inside because I've been in accidents before. Wow. Or, there's different things. And if I'm not telling that to him openly, with the possibility of him saying, I'm going to reject what you're saying, or I'm going to, or what's wrong with you for being scared of that, like, get over it, that he could handle it that way. But it shouldn't stop me from being open and honest with how I'm feeling. But there is a very real responsibility for the person who's receiving the vulnerable communication, because he has a choice in that moment, either to say, wow, like, I'm sorry that you're feeling fear. That was not my intention in my driving. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
Or he could say, get over it, right? Like, but he actually in that moment has that opportunity to choose either way to go.
Yeah.
And if you want intimacy, you want to go with the first response.
Yeah. And I think, like, how vulnerability and intimacy is connected is just by saying, listen, I can't do this on my own. I need your help. Like, it all comes down to, like, when we come to Jesus, like, we getting vulnerable with him. We telling him stuff like we don't tell nobody. We're like, Jesus, I love coffee and I can't stop drinking coffee. I love, this video game, and oh my God, it's killing my fingers, but I can't stop playing it. But you don't tell nobody. So, like, how vulnerability and intimacy is connected is being vulnerable and just saying, I need your help. I cannot do this on my own. The same way we talk to Jesus, we got to talk to our spouse. And I know for me, it costs me. It's not easy. We might look and we're like, oh yeah, it's easy to say. It's easy to, you could tell me that. But it took time to get there. Like, it took a lot of grace. It took a lot of truth. And so I think that's for me, is just like, it's the same thing when you connect with Jesus and then you have that vulnerable time with him. Like, getting on your knees is called being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Like, it means, like, I am surrendering myself and I need your help.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's being honest, right, about what's going on inside. And I think trust is a big part of this. And I think that's one of the hindrances in not just our, vulnerability with God, or our intimacy with God. There's so many times people say, I'm struggling to connect with God, but the truth and the reality is the amount of the presence of God, it doesn't change. God is there. Like, it's our perception and awareness of his presence that goes in and out. He's always there. He's always there. But what I think tends to happen is there are places in our lives where maybe we don't trust God, or we don't trust our spouse, or we don't trust the people around us, because what's happened is we've given a little bit of ourselves, and it was not taken the right way. Our needs were rejected. How we felt was rejected, or ignored, or pushed aside. And so what we learned from that is, I can't trust. When I'm open and honest about how I feel, I'm ignored.
Yeah.
Or I'm pushed away, or whatever it is. And then we start to live that out in our other relationships. And instead of being honest, then the next thing you know, you wake up and your marriage is over.
Wow.
Or the next thing you know, you wake and you're like, how did this happen? And it's not overnight, right? These are little choices that happen and build over time. Nothing just suddenly happens.
Yeah.
And I think that the trust factor is so huge. And so if you want that breakthrough in this area, especially if you're doing this with a spouse, right?
Yeah.
Or with, pre-marriage, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever it is, friends, children. Your children's a great example, right?
Yes.
If a kid comes to you and says, Mom, Dad, I did this, and they know that they're going to get punished, they're not going to keep coming to you with things.
Yeah, that's so good.
If they can come to you and there's a lesson to be learned, there's open conversation, there's, it was wrong because of this, and there is going to be a consequence, but I still love you, and I thank you for telling me the truth.
Yeah.
That is the world of difference, because now you're building intimacy.
Yeah.
Right? It's said that intimacy is into me, you see. It's allowing people to see the inner parts of you, and not you trying to hold up a mirror to the other person and say, look, here's what you're doing. Look at yourself. It's, you said it, ripping open your chest and saying, look what's inside of my heart.
And how vulnerability and intimacy is connected is just saying, like, listen, I definitely just need to be understood. I definitely just need some help. And a lot of people that have like addictions, like alcohol or like drug addiction, a lot of people just need a team of people knowing that they're going through the same struggle. That's the only way sometimes that they get healed, knowing that they're not the only ones. And what we're saying here is like, listen, we were there. We're not 100% there, but we are on our way there. And we have come a long way. And there's times where I'm like, I don't want to get vulnerable with her. She's
having a bad day.
She's having a bad day at work. But then again, she just tells me, like, baby, I just need your help right now. Or I'm feeling this type of way. I had a bad day with my boss. My boss was being this. Or I had a bad day with my coworker. And she's like, I'm going to take some time. And I'll come back. And then when we come back, we get vulnerable. And then when we get vulnerable, we end up actually with a deeper conversation and deeper communication together. And then after that, we're just like, wow, this is awesome.
Yeah. And what's so important about this, and I think this kind of connects to the church, like, you're going to hear me say church culture, and what I mean is not a sweeping statement about every church. But there is a very real, for some people who have experienced, kind of perception that when you come to Christ, that you can't make a mistake. Now you're suddenly, like, you had to skip the whole sanctification process. Like, you got baptized in the Spirit, now you're Jesus. Like, no, it doesn't. There are layers, there are levels of healing that God takes us through. And so that's what the beautiful thing about grace is. But there's almost this barrier at times, and for people, to be honest about what they're going through. And so we hide and we put on the religious mask and we go say, "Oh, how are you? How was your weekend? Good to see you. God bless you. How are you doing? Things are great." Things are not great. I had a terrible week. My kid's not listening to me. I maybe I just lost my job, right? But that takes a level of trust and vulnerability that is not always present in church culture sometimes. And it's a shame because James 5:16 tells us to confess your sins one to another, and pray for one another that you may be healed. So without confession, without honesty, without saying, "Hey, this is what I'm going through," the possibility for healing is not there, because it first takes a recognition that something's wrong and I'm dealing with something. And to be able to physically say those words, I think, is that first breakthrough of denial.
Yeah.
Because denial is what keeps us from saying anything's wrong to begin with. Right?
And a good example is like, I was denial at one point, right? I was denial of, listen, I don't have, nothing's wrong with me. I'm good. I smile, I go to work, I work hard, I don't have no problems. I'm in a good position, I'm in a good place. I think I'm really good right now. I'm smiling. But over time, stuff just starts to build inside of me. And over time, just, before marriage is a whole different lifestyle when you're married. When before marriage, nobody bothered me. I did what I wanted to do, went to the park, went to work, got home, slept right after work, got married. Boom. Come home. Hey, baby, can you help me with the baby real quick? I'm really tired. I want to go to sleep. And so it's a complete different ballgame. And what I want to get to is that to be vulnerable just basically means to be open to criticism and attack. And I'm not talking about somebody who's at work and is very toxic. It's okay to be vulnerable with him. What I'm saying is just like to the people that you're close with. Like to build deep relationships like Jesus did with his disciples. It's to have that level of trust. And Jesus even built intimacy and vulnerability with Judah. And he went deep. And so,
you mean Judas?
Judas, yes.
No.
Judas.
Judah.
Yes. Not Judah, Judas. So
that's a really good, and I think this kind of, and we're not going to get into too much of this today, but that kind of connects with boundaries too.
Yes.
And it's, you don't have to be vulnerable with everybody about everything, right? Like we all know that person that tells you their whole life story and you're like, I appreciate your vulnerability, but also,
I know somebody like that.
And if you don't know somebody, it's probably you. But that's okay. We love you anyway. But no, and so that's why boundaries are so important too. And you might actually be telling too much to the wrong people, and that's a whole other thing.
That's a whole other.
But the people who are close to you, that should be the closest to you, right? It really is well, number one is God. And if you have that relationship with God and it's beautiful and it's close and it's intimate, it's open, it's overflowing, it's going to overflow into other relationships. Yes. I've often found that when there's something lacking in my ability to love my husband, there's something lacking in my connection with God. Because it's not me who has the strength to love him in his worst days, it's God in me who gives me that strength to love him. And so if I'm having an issue with God and I haven't dealt with that issue, I'm definitely not going to be able to deal with this one, right? Not that he's an issue. But so go ahead.
It's basically just carrying on. Like if you're already having a stress at work and you don't know how to have a balanced life, you're going to carry the stress from work and you're going to bring it right home. It's kind of like a book bag. You have a lot of rocks. Some of them say work, and some of them say home. And some of those rocks, you gotta be like, stay here at my desk. I'll see you rocks tomorrow. And these rocks that I have in my book bag, this is my home rocks. And what I mean with that, every rock represents like the responsibility of level that you have. And so what I want to tell you is, so why is it important to be vulnerable? Why is it important? Like, why is it important? So basically, these are the basics of communication with your spouse.
No, I mean not just starting relationships, but
Any.
going deep
Yeah.
and to maintain. Like, your goal has to be to connect. If your goal is not to connect, then you're gonna be in a situation where you're like, I don't have my friends around, I don't have family.
Yeah.
And sometimes that feels like a safer place for us. I'm gonna be by myself. I'm just gonna isolate. That was always my go-to. Especially when there was a difficult situation, I'd instantly start feeling fear. I'm like, I can't talk about this because I've tried to maybe talk to you in the past, but it wasn't received.
Wow.
And so now there's this fear response in me. I'm afraid that you're gonna, not recognize or validate what I'm saying to you. And this kind of goes with validation, but to not say, like, even if it's not the truth of the whole story of what's happening, of his intention, there might be some judgment, some unforgiveness in what I'm feeling, but it doesn't deny what I'm feeling.
Yeah.
And there is such a power in just being heard, and being received, which really does build that connection. And so it's interesting because when we think of intimacy, God, the way he speaks about those who he loves, right? His people is intimate. It's an intimate love. I think of Habakkuk, right, as an example, just the story in Habakkuk. And I also think about, the Song of Solomon. That
was deep.
Yeah. So there's a scripture in Song of Solomon 2:10, which says, "My beloved speaks and says to me, 'Arise, my love, my beautiful one, and come away.'" There is an invitation to conversation. There's an invitation to intimacy, right? So God invites us to come away, right? And to just spend time together in this place, this vulnerable place, where we can talk and learn about one another and grow.
Yeah. And it's very important because vulnerability and intimacy is very important because we are social creatures. Like, if you put me in an island, I'll probably die of not being able to talk to somebody. I'm very social.
Or not having music.
Or not having music.
That's it. He needs his music. Me, I'm like, I'm alright.
Yes, it's like, whatever.
Give me a book.
Give me a book. Hers is books, I'm music. So if you put me in an island, or you put somebody in an island for, let's say, a year, and he has no communication with nobody, what is that movie when he was stuck in an island?
Oh, yeah.
What, I forgot the movie.
Castaway or something?
I don't know what that movie is, but he draws a little ball. And,
yeah. Wilson.
Yes. And so he tries to communicate with that. And so we made social. And God, that's how God draws. Like, if we stop communicating with people, we start to get depression. We start to get anxiety. That's an area of intimacy. That's an area where God just molds us and says, this is the way I'm going to build people to be social people and get loved by people and loved by God. You just have to be very, very vulnerable with your friends, with your spouse, and with God. And that's vulnerability and intimacy is very important. And I can't overemphasize that, how important this is.
Yes, and we're gonna wrap up here soon, but just a last couple things. It really does need to translate to our church relationships as well. And so I want to kind of challenge you to, the next time that you're in church. Some of us aren't. Maybe you're still with the being home and pandemic. Okay. But if you are in a church, I'm going to challenge you that if somebody says, "Hey, how are you?" that you're honest.
Yes.
Be honest.
Be honest.
Stop lying.
Stop.
Stop it. No, really. Like, I mean, you don't have to tell them every little detail.
Yeah. Like, my dog died yesterday and I buried him in the backyard. Like, you don't have to tell them that.
maybe that's what's bothering them.
Okay, you're right. Get vulnerable.
So I'm going to challenge you to, the next time, you are in church, or maybe, you're, even if you're doing church online, that's fine. The next time you're at work, or you're in a place where maybe there's somebody that you're wanting to connect to, test the waters, right?
Yeah,
Test
definitely.
the waters of vulnerability. And, if somebody says, hey, how are you? Be honest. Say, no, I'm not doing too well. I'm feeling really frustrated. This deadline's coming up. I'm not sure. Just be honest, because I think that's also what builds friendships, and it builds all of our relationships, right? When you can test little by little. I think one thing for me, I found it hard to connect in the past, especially when building new friendships. I found it hard to connect in the past with people when I've given a little bit of, hey, this is what's going on with me, and it wasn't received or reciprocated. So there's been a lot of times where, I've had situations where I had somebody in my life for 6 months, and I was trying, during this time period to share a little. But after, I think it was like 6 months of just trying to connect to this person, I couldn't go deeper than our surface conversations because the person wouldn't reciprocate the vulnerability. So there's no ability to go deeper in intimacy in our relationship. So it really is a two-way street. So if you are a, wives, I think sometimes have a little bit of an easier time with this, unless, you can speak to this, unless as a husband or as a man, you maybe didn't, if you grew up with a mom, this might be a little easier for you at times. But also men, you have to take that step forward and talk. I know it's so hard, but there's so much healing, and you can speak to that a little more with that in your life.
Yeah, and so the society pictures us as the strong guy. You can't talk about your emotions, you can't talk about your feelings. If you talk about your feelings, you're a girl, or if you're talking about this, you're being soft. And that's how God made us. There's no way around it. Like, either you learn to communicate, or you're gonna be hurt in all the relationships that you have. And you're just gonna go to the next relationship. Why is this relationship not working? Why is this other not working? Get vulnerable and intimate for a guy. And I know it's hard, and I know it's tough, and I'd rather get vulnerable and intimate than keep moving in different relationships and getting hurt and again. Why is it not working? Get vulnerable and intimate and say, baby, I need your help. This is a circle of trust, and every time we share with each other, we understand each other, and I connect with her and she connects with me. And why does this have impact in relationships? Because if you're not getting vulnerable and intimate, you only have surface relationships. You're not real with yourself. You only have a surface relationship. And that's why a lot of the churches, a lot of the places where we work, it's full of pretty faces and smiles, but there's no vulnerability. And so that's why vulnerability impacts any relationship.
And I think one thing also for the ladies, you can help your husbands or boyfriends, right? You can actually help them to figure out what's going on, because I think sometimes what tends to happen is, especially with men, I think, that struggle, let's say, with anger, is you're not sure how you feel. And because you're unable to identify the feeling, there's anger. It's just outbursts of anger. Angry, whatever, like yelling, walking away, or maybe you just abandon the conversation, right? And you just, I don't have to deal with it, and I leave, or I shut down. So I think the ladies, you can help by creating that safe space for him to open up and helping him identify what he's feeling, because God has created women in such a beautiful way to feel, right? We are intuitively, typically, more in touch, and this is not, some women may struggle more than men in a relationship, but typically we are more intuitively in tune, I guess, to our feelings and what's going on. Like, and we can express it usually a little better, right? I'm feeling frustrated. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling depressed. Like, whatever it is, those emotions that are coming up. I'm feeling excited. I'm shocked, right? Whatever it is. But I think for men, it might just come out in anger or abandonment of the conversation or any of those things. And so women can really help their husbands to uncover what's going on by inviting them into that conversation and helping them identify. Because the truth of the matter is, especially like I know today, there are programs where there's social emotional learning, and kids are learning, what is my feeling, what am I going through, what's happening inside. I know that in society at large, and for the last how many years, men especially are not taught that. So you're not actually intentionally taught how to identify what you're feeling. You just, and you mentioned it before, you're like, I didn't even know that I had feelings, because it becomes numb. You're like, I've shoved them away so much, I don't even know what I feel, or I don't even feel. So
and anger, me speaking from a place where I had that, and I believe in Jesus' name that I'm healed from that. It's a place of just like a lot of carry on. Again, let me go back to the book bag. And you have this book of anger just carrying on you. And rock at work, co-workers just pull out of rocks in your book bag. And you're like, oh, furious. You're like, are you serious right now? And you got home, and your wife said, can you please take out the trash in the most kindest way? And you're like, are you serious right now? You didn't just see what happened at work? But she was not there. And what I'm trying to get to is, anger is just a lot of stuff inside over years or even months, just bottled up.
It's other emotions that so a lot of the times when you think about anger, people identify anger as an emotion, but typically to get to the point of anger, there's other emotions and things happening under it to cause
stress,
the anger.
Like stress, like a hard day of work, like you're physically just mentally tired, and you don't have a capacity to think. Any frustration, anything that happened at work, something that you can carry on is just so heavy on you, and you just get frustrated. Learn not to get that frustration out on the person that you mostly love. Learn to get it out in a different way. If you're like, I really need help, I'm so angry at my wife all the time, every time I come home, what I started doing over time is just decomposing all that stuff before I came home. Like, sit down outside for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 16 minutes, 20 minutes, and just decompress. And just get vulnerable with God and say, Lord, I'm really struggling right here, and I need your help. A really practical way that I can give you is get real with yourself and get real with your wife. Yes.
Yeah, that's so good.
Yes.
And I think that's going to help build the intimacy because you're just able to have that intimate conversation. And remember, just intimacy is just closeness. So, relationships that have been through something and come through that thing end up being so much closer than those who haven't been tested or tried. And that's why God tests us, right? He tries us. He tries our faith, because when we come at the other side of that, right, it's stronger, it's closer, it's more intimate, it's more abundant. Not that it's fun going through the trial or what the test, right?
Dry moment.
The dry, right? Whatever it is. But when we get to the end of it, it's rewarding. There's a reward that is really there. And in this case, it's a closer relationship. When you think about, there's physical intimacy, it's closeness of bodies, right? When you think of spiritual intimacy, it's you connecting on a spiritual level. And then you have emotional intimacy. And for men, they're always not always. For men, it's, I think, physical intimacy, the woman, emotional intimacy. And so you need both in order to go really deep in your relationship, and not just, prioritizing one over the other, but allowing God to bring both of those things together so that your relationship can be more rich and intimate?
Try to build a circle of intimate friends where they can support you. Support is the key here and to getting intimate.
Community is so important.
Community support, and it starts at home. If you want to heal other people, it starts at home. If you want to be a minister, it starts at home. If you want to do a business, it starts at home. I read a lot of books where it says where this man like succeeds at work, but his house is breaking down. And so just get support and get community. And this is the reason why we're here.
So we really hope this video is a blessing to you, just about intimacy, vulnerability. I know we gave you a lot to chew on here today, so please rewatch the videos, take notes. Yes. We'd love to hear from you in the comments. Yes. How we want to hear your experiences. Yeah. Where are you in this? Is this all new to you? Yeah. Is this, are you somewhere on the journey? We would love to hear from you. We really love that.
Yeah. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment, like it, and share it. Yes.
Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. Yeah, share it because you never know. Maybe somebody really is needing this. Like really is needing this. And yeah.
And don't forget to follow us on Instagram for different, just inspiring content and updates. And we just want to thank you so much for your support so far to this channel. We have been really blessed to be able to come together and make these videos for you, and we really hope that they bless you.
Yeah, definitely. And just hold on tight.
We're on our way from victim to victory.
From victim to victory.
All right. God bless you.
God bless you. Love you guys.
Bye.